The ringing of the phone brought my vacation to an abrupt halt. "Mr. Harrington, your house is ablaze. It looks like a tragic accident." I rose to my feet, my heart pounding and sand still coating my soles. However, a 15-year career in the justice system had impressed upon me that there are no accidents after you have declined to pay the $600 monthly protection fee to a group styling themselves as a homeowners association. They possessed no legal standing, but they were armed with lighters and audacity. I was left with a single path forward. I could either watch as they demolished everything my family had built, or I could leverage every skill I had acquired to make this HOA the subject of its own ruinous headline. My wife Laura's diagnosis with stage 3 lymphoma last spring was the sole reason we moved to Oakage Estates. I had never desired to live there. Suddenly, residing just 30 minutes from New England's foremost oncology center became our highest priority. My entire career had been dedicated to seeing justice done, but my family now required my presence more than the legal system did. At 48, I reasoned it was an opportune time for a more tranquil existence anyway. The real estate agent appeared hesitant as I endorsed the documents. "Oakage is a wonderful community, Mr. Harrington," she stated with a well-rehearsed smile. "Just be certain to review all the neighborhood guidelines with care." I gave a distracted nod, my thoughts more occupied with how Laura would manage the stairs on difficult days than with any community rules. When inquired about my profession, I typically claimed to be a remote software engineer. It was a simpler explanation. My true role attracted a level of attention I preferred to avoid. The moving truck had scarcely departed when a firm knock resounded through our still barren living room. A woman with impeccably coiffed blonde hair and a smile that failed to reach her eyes was on our doorstep. "Barbara Whitfield," she declared, offering a manicured hand. "President of the Oakage Estates Homeowners Association. I wanted to extend a personal welcome to our community." Her entire demeanor, from her crisply pressed pantsuit to the clipboard nestled under her arm, exuded a need for control. "Thank you," I responded, briefly taking her hand. "I'm Michael Harrington. My wife Laura and daughter Sophia are upstairs unpacking." She thrust a substantial folder into my hands. "This is your HOA registration packet. The monthly fee of $600 is payable on the 1st. We require your banking details for automatic withdrawal by tomorrow." I blinked, taken aback. "I'm sorry, but my real estate agent informed me this property was not part of any compulsory HOA. It was explicitly designated as HOA exempt in my purchase agreement." Barbara's smile grew taut. "I regret to say your agent was misinformed. Every home in Oakage Estates is under our authority. Everyone contributes." Her tone held something more than mere entitlement. It was a threat. It was a tone I recognized from individuals accustomed to achieving their goals through intimidation. "I'll have to look over my documents," I said, maintaining a neutral voice. Barbara's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, her composed facade slipped. "Mr. Harrington, I highly recommend you cooperate with the HOA. Life can become challenging for homeowners who fail to adhere to our standards." She presented me with her business card before pivoting on her heel. "I'll expect your paperwork by Friday. Welcome to Oakage." Over the following days, I started to get acquainted with our neighbors. Tom Peterson, a 60-year-old retired Army veteran living to our left, invited me over for coffee. "How is the move settling in?" he inquired, pouring me a cup of potent black coffee. "Well, aside from being waylaid by the HOA president on our first day." Tom's amiable look wavered. "Barbara has already approached you, I see." He lowered his tone. "Listen, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but be cautious with her. The HOA here is not what it appears to be." Before he could continue, his phone rang. "HOA emergency meeting. I have to go." He gave me a pointed look as he departed. "Review your property deeds thoroughly, Michael, and perhaps think about installing some security cameras." That evening, I encountered Jessica Rodriguez from 3 houses away, who quietly cautioned me about Barbara. After I declined to join, peculiar things began to occur. My trash wasn't picked up. My mail went missing. My car was vandalized. She looked at me directly. "Barbara's son, Tyler, is employed by Meridian Real Estate, the firm that has been attempting to acquire half the neighborhood. It's all interconnected." The subsequent morning, I discovered a violation notice affixed to my door. "Lawn height exceeds 2.5 inches. Fine, $150. My lawn was flawlessly kept. I had mowed it myself just yesterday. Through the window, I noticed Barbara and a younger man taking pictures of my property. That afternoon, a trip to the county records office validated my suspicions. My property was, in fact, free from the HOA covenant. Barbara was running a bluff, extorting funds from residents unaware of their rights. That night, I set up security cameras that covered every perspective of our property. Laura observed me with concern. "Michael, what is happening? This isn't you." I secured the final camera. "Just a preventative measure, my dear. Some of the HOA rules here seem a bit unusual." As I reviewed the camera feeds later, an email from Barbara popped up. Final notice. Your persistent refusal to join the Oakage HOA will lead to escalating actions. Prior to becoming a software engineer, I had dedicated years to managing intricate cases. A rapacious HOA and a woman with a manufactured blonde image and flawless acrylic nails did not intimidate me. What they were unaware of was that I had positioned cameras all around my house from the very first day. And the footage those cameras recorded that night compelled me to contact an old friend. I was awakened early the next morning by Sophia's shriek. Rushing downstairs, I saw my 16-year-old daughter gazing out the window, her face a mask of horror. Our car was coated in garish red spray paint. "Join HOA or leave" was scrawled across both sides. Laura appeared behind me, her face pale under her headscarf. "Who would do such a thing?" she whispered. I knew precisely who, but I kept my voice calm. "Probably just some local kids," I lied, already pulling up the security footage on my phone. The night vision camera had recorded it all. Tyler Whitfield and another individual, their faces partly hidden by hoodies, vandalizing our car at 3:17 in the morning. I forwarded the footage to my private email before showing Laura and Sophia the camera's recordings. "See? I'm going to notify the police." The officer who responded was understanding but ultimately unhelpful. "Without a clear facial ID, there isn't much we can do," he stated, scribbling in his notepad. I would later find out that the police chief was Barbara's brother-in-law. The local justice apparatus was compromised. That afternoon, while Laura was at a chemotherapy session, I consulted a real estate attorney who verified that my property was indeed exempt from the HOA covenant. But this pattern of harassment you are describing is alarming. These sorts of conflicts can become very unpleasant without formal mediation. I came home to find Laura at the kitchen table, her hands clasped around a now-cold mug of tea. "The mothers at Sophia's school are shunning me," she said softly. When I went to pick her up, I heard someone call us troublemakers, saying we were depressing property values. Her eyes met mine. "Michael, what is truly happening here?" I sat down next to her and recounted everything. Barbara's threats, the exempt properties, Jessica's warnings, the video footage. "This is not merely about the height of our lawn. Something larger is afoot, and we have become an impediment." Laura took my hand. "Then we document it all. We construct a case. That is what you have always taught Sophia, isn't it? Confront bullies with evidence, not aggression." Later that week, Barbara convened an emergency HOA meeting. Though I wasn't a member, I went anyway, taking a seat quietly at the back. Barbara stood at the lectern, her voice resonant. "We have recently had some residents challenge the authority of this association," she declared, her eyes finding mine. "Let me be unequivocal. The Oakage HOA is here to safeguard all our property values. Those who subvert our efforts are subverting their neighbors' investments." A ripple of murmurs went through the assembly. Furthermore, I've gotten reports about a new resident with a potentially questionable past. My blood chilled as she alluded vaguely to criminal elements while repeatedly glancing in my direction. She was publicly implying I had a criminal history. We must present a united front against threats to our community. After the meeting, several neighbors avoided me, scurrying to their vehicles. Only Tom and Jessica came over. "That was despicable, even for her," Tom grumbled. "She has never attacked someone's character before." Jessica nodded, looking anxious. "It's because you possess the documents that prove your exemption. You are a threat." I watched Barbara holding court with her supporters across the parking lot. I need to find out exactly what she is planning. The following day, I got a notice alleging our property was in breach of non-existent city building codes. The letter was on what looked like official city stationery, but was an obvious forgery. More alarming was what I found when I examined the HOA records. Penalty fees were not being deposited into a community fund, but directly into Barbara's personal bank account. That evening, Laura was in tears at the kitchen table. "The hospital called," she said. "Someone attempted to gain access to my medical records, pretending to be from our insurance provider. Someone was prying into our most private information. Later that night, reviewing the security footage, I watched Tyler and two other men creep into our backyard. They decimated my garden, Laura's one source of joy during her treatment, and left a note impaled in the turf. Accidents happen to people who don't listen. It was all captured flawlessly on my cameras. I spent the next morning with a private investigator, a former contact from my previous profession. The report was delivered promptly. Barbara had been under investigation for financial fraud in Connecticut 5 years prior. Tyler had a sealed juvenile record and was employed by a real estate company that was actively purchasing properties in our neighborhood. Most crucially, the investigator unearthed a proposal to redevelop our entire neighborhood into a commercial complex once a sufficient number of properties had been secured. "We will look into your complaint, but I'm not giving any guarantees," the police officer stated, clearly uninterested in what he perceived as a neighborhood tiff. I didn't hold it against him. From an outsider's perspective, it appeared to be a trivial dispute over grass and fences. He was unaware that Barbara had just made the most significant error of her life. There were legal instruments available to me that a standard software engineer would not possess. When that woman threatened my wife's health, she unleashed a force she could never have anticipated. Within days of my police report filing, Barbara intensified her campaign against us. Flyers started showing up in mailboxes all over the neighborhood, alerting residents to dangerous elements on our street. Each flyer was carefully worded to avoid naming me directly. Libel laws were still a concern, after all, but they contained enough specifics about our house and car for everyone to know who was being targeted. Some hinted at a criminal history. Others suggested I was not to be trusted near children. The stress caused Laura's condition to deteriorate. Sophia returned from school in tears after her classmates questioned if her father was really a criminal. "This needs to end," Laura pleaded, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Can't we just pay the ridiculous fees? It's not worth what this is doing to our family." I held her hand, sensing the delicateness of her fingers. If we surrender, they triumph, and they will continue to do this to others. I didn't tell her that I had found 3 other families who had been driven from their homes by similar methods over the last 2 years. This was no longer just about principle. I initiated my first counter-strategy: more concealed cameras around our property and portable audio recorders for every encounter with HOA members. Tom assisted with the installation, his military exactitude proving unexpectedly handy. "I've been waiting for years for someone to challenge her," he confessed as we adjusted a camera to overlook the back fence. "Most people either give in or move." When I inquired why he had remained, his expression soured. "My late wife is interred in the cemetery 2 blocks from here. I'm not abandoning her." Jessica supplied crucial intelligence from inside the community, relaying conversations she overheard at school functions and local get-togethers. Barbara was telling people I was the subject of a federal investigation, that I had been dismissed from my last job for embezzlement, and that Laura's illness was merely a bid for sympathy. Each falsehood was more audacious than the one before. On Tuesday, a man in a poorly fitting inspector's uniform showed up at our door, professing to be from the city building department. "Received complaints of safety breaches," he muttered, attempting to look past me into the house. I recognized him instantly as one of the individuals from the garden vandalism footage. "I'll need to see your official identification and a warrant," I stated calmly, already recording the exchange. He reddened, issued vague threats of fines, and then beat a hasty retreat. That evening, Barbara distributed a mass email to the neighborhood concerning imminent action against violators and protecting community standards. The following day, our trash was not picked up. The day after, our mail was delivered saturated with water. Then, the window of Laura's car was shattered in the hospital parking lot. There were no witnesses, naturally, and no useful security footage, just another unfortunate incident in an expanding series of harassments. I needed to grasp the full extent of the HOA's financial dealings. To that end, I focused on Douglas Henderson, a 62-year-old retired accountant who was the HOA's treasurer. In contrast to Barbara's inner circle of sycophants, Douglas had always seemed uneasy during contentious meetings. After a contrived accidental encounter with him at the local coffee shop, I initiated a conversation about retirement planning, a subject I knew a former accountant would find engaging. An hour later, Following discussions on topics from stock portfolios to his grandchildren, I subtly guided the conversation to the HOA. It must be a challenge to oversee the finances for the entire community, I remarked offhandedly. Douglas's expression changed almost imperceptibly. It's more complex than most people imagine, he conceded, his voice dropping. Barbara has her own methods for managing things. He glanced at his watch with a nervous air. I should be going. As he collected his belongings, I pushed my card across the table. If you ever find you need to discuss those complexities, I'm a very good listener. The situation at Sophia's school worsened dramatically. During the lunch break, a group of students subjected her to public humiliation, chanting "criminal's kid," until a teacher stepped in. The principal contacted me, his tone apologetic yet firm. We are unable to control rumors circulating in the community, Mr. Harrington. That very afternoon, Laura received a letter that appeared official from the city planning department, another fabrication, stating our house was in violation of numerous ordinances and was at risk of foreclosure. The shock induced a panic attack that landed her back in the hospital. As I stood by her bedside that night, observing the machines that monitored her fragile heart, something within me hardened. This had moved beyond neighborhood disputes. They were now threatening the lives of my family. The time for defensive maneuvers was over. The next HOA meeting was set for 7 o'clock on Thursday evening. I got there early, taking a prominent seat in the front row with a thick binder of documents next to me. Barbara faltered for a second when she spotted me, but quickly regained her composure, proceeding with her standard agenda of community grievances and financial updates. When she invited questions from the floor, I rose at once. I would like to examine the HOA financial statements for the past 3 years, I declared, my voice resonating through the suddenly quiet room. Specifically, I am interested in seeing where the violation fees and penalties have been directed. Barbara's smile became rigid. Those records are for board members' eyes only. I opened my binder and took out a printed copy of the HOA bylaws. In fact, Section 7, Paragraph 3 stipulates that all financial records must be accessible to community members upon request. I am now making that request. A murmur spread through the attendees. Barbara's face turned a deep red. This meeting is not the proper setting. If you want to see the records, you can make an appointment with our treasurer. All gazes shifted to Douglas, who was seated rigidly at the side table, his eyes riveted on his folded hands. That would be unconventional, he uttered. Barbara promptly concluded the meeting, but not before I saw several residents regarding her with newfound doubt. Later that night, a knock on my home office door made me jump. Douglas Henderson was on my porch, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "We have to talk," he whispered. "But not here. I have copies of the financial records for the last 5 years. It's much worse than you imagine." He gave me a flash drive. Barbara has been diverting HOA funds into her personal accounts since she became president. Tyler's company receives all the maintenance contracts at exorbitant rates. They have been using the violation fees to finance their real estate acquisitions. He swallowed with difficulty. "I've been aware for months, but I was too scared to say anything. They threatened my daughter's position at the hospital when I raised questions about an expense last year." The office door had just closed behind Douglas when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Need to speak with you urgently about Barbara. I possess information you require." I glanced out the window and saw a camera flash from a car parked across the street. Someone was observing me, but they were unaware that I had a strategy that years in the justice system had taught me how to implement. Barbara wanted to engage in dirty tactics, which was fine, but I knew how to use the rules to achieve the best outcome. During the next week, I held clandestine meetings with 5 other families who had been harassed by the HOA but were too intimidated to speak up. We met in Tom's basement, far from watchful eyes and possible recording devices. I documented their accounts, unauthorized fines, menacing letters, and property damage, all fitting the same profile. Each family had either finally paid the unlawful HOA fees or sold their homes for less than market value to Tyler's real estate firm. She threatened to involve child services when I challenged the fees, a young mother whispered, gripping her husband's hand. She claimed they had received complaints about our parenting. An elderly man nodded with a grim expression. They turned off my sprinkler system during the hottest week of the summer, destroying my whole garden, and then fined me for neglecting the landscape. I organized their statements, adding them to my expanding file of evidence. Meanwhile, Barbara and Tyler became aware that I was actively investigating them. Their methods evolved from intimidation to more direct measures. One evening, a man in a shoddily assembled police uniform came to our door, asserting he had a warrant related to neighborhood disturbances. When I insisted on seeing his badge number and official identification, he quickly withdrew to a waiting vehicle, the same one I had seen watching my house before. The next day, our electricity mysteriously went out, even though no outages were reported in the vicinity. When the utility company came to investigate, they discovered that our external fuse box had been tampered with. Most unsettling was when Barbara confronted Laura directly as she was walking home from a treatment session. "Your husband is making some very powerful enemies," Barbara had said to her, standing uncomfortably close. "Accidents occur every day to people who fail to understand their proper place." I needed to comprehend the full extent of our situation. To that end, I contacted Christine Weber, an investigative journalist for the local paper. "I'm not seeking a story just yet," I clarified over coffee at a diner located 20 miles from our neighborhood. "Only information." Christine had recently written a series on corruption and development projects in adjacent counties. "Meridian Real Estate," she reflected, looking through her notes. "They've been acquiring properties throughout this area. The rumor is they are a front for Capital Core Development, which intends to build a massive commercial complex, but they need adjacent properties to proceed." She observed me intently. "If your account is accurate, this HOA president is not merely running a small-time extortion racket. She's enabling a multi-million-dollar land acquisition." The next part of the puzzle came into focus when Douglas secretly gave me copies of dubious HOA financial dealings. "Barbara keeps 2 different sets of accounting records," he explained, his hands trembling as he handed me the flash drive. "The public one reflects standard community expenditures. The private accounting shows where the money is actually going. The records expose that over $1.5 million in homeowner fees had been redirected to personal accounts and questionable consulting payments to shell corporations controlled by Tyler." Hours after we met, Douglas called me in a state of panic. "Barbara knows I spoke with you. She came to my house and threatened to disclose some past errors I made. I have to step down as treasurer." "I'm sorry." I reassured him that he had done the right thing and pledged to shield him from any additional involvement. The trap was tightening, but not quickly enough. The situation escalated to a crisis when I got an urgent call from Sophia's school. She had fainted during her gym class, found unresponsive and pale. At the hospital, the doctor took me aside, his face serious. "We detected traces of a stimulant in her system. It's not a recreational substance, but something of prescription-level strength. Has she been on any medication?" My blood turned ice. Sophia was not on any medication. Someone had intentionally drugged my 16-year-old daughter. With the school principal's hesitant approval, I examined the security footage from the cafeteria for that day. The footage was blurry but distinct enough. Brenda Wilson, an HOA board member and a cafeteria employee, was seen loitering near Sophia's unattended water bottle during the lunch break. I observed her glancing around before she bent over the table, her hand moving swiftly over the bottle. I had reached my limit. That evening, I got in touch with James Reynolds, a former colleague from my time in the justice system. "I need some off-the-record advice," I explained, transmitting the evidence I had collected. "The local law enforcement is compromised." James was quiet as he went through the files, his expression growing grimmer with each document. "Michael, this is more than just HOA overreach," he finally stated. "You have evidence of mail fraud, financial fraud, property damage, and now the assault of a minor. This requires federal intervention." He paused. "But they will need more than what you've got. They will need definitive proof of intent and collusion." I nodded, grasping what he was implying without stating it outright. "We had to catch them in the act, admitting to their offenses." "I can arrange that," I assured him. "Just inform me of what is needed for a completely solid case." While Laura remained with Sophia at the hospital, I put the final stage of my strategy into motion. I discreetly placed a tiny recording device inside a decorative plant, peace offering, which I had delivered to Barbara's house with a note of apology, proposing we resolve our issues as neighbors. That evening, just as I had anticipated, Barbara called an emergency meeting with Tyler and key HOA board members in her living room. Through the listening device, I heard their entire discussion. "We have to get rid of him. Or at least his house." Barbara's voice came through with clarity. "If a fire occurs, insurance will pay for it, and he will be forced to leave." My heart throbbed. They were literally planning to set my house on fire. I looked down at the file on my desk, the evidence I had amassed over many weeks. It was time to dial the number I had been saving. The tip from my law enforcement friend about the arson plan gave me very little time to act. That night, I relocated Laura and Sophia to a hotel under an assumed name, telling them it was a weekend trip to help them de-stress. I then proceeded to install more cameras and a high-tech fire alarm system that was linked directly to the fire department. My investigation had revealed that the HOA had siphoned off more than $1.5 million of residents' money for personal ventures and extravagant living. The reason for Barbara's affinity for designer attire and Tyler's new sports car was suddenly clear. The financial records Douglas had given me plainly showed how they had been running their racket for years, but I needed them to do something that could not be dismissed as a simple error in judgment. My chance arrived more quickly than I had anticipated. I intentionally let it be known through Tom that I would be out of town on a business trip for 2 days. In truth, I was keeping an eye on my home's security system from a motel just 3 miles away. Around 2:15 in the morning on the second night, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the property. On the live feed, I saw Tyler and 2 other men dressed in dark attire as they neared my house. They were carrying gasoline cans and moved with an unsettling air of assurance, as if this was not their first time. They gained entry to my garage through a side window, doused the area and the exterior wall of the ground floor with gasoline, and then struck a match. The fire erupted instantly, swallowing the garage door in a matter of minutes. My automated fire suppression system kicked in, and I concurrently dialed 911, witnessing the whole event on my phone. By the time I reached my property, fire engines and police vehicles had cordoned off the house. The fire had been largely confined to the garage and a section of the first floor, but smoke and water damage had spread through the rest of the building. As I stood looking at the devastation, a recognizable voice spoke from beside me. "What a dreadful accident," Barbara remarked, her voice laden with feigned sympathy. She had shown up with suspicious speed for that time of night. This is what occurs when properties are not kept up to the required standards. If you had been a member of the HOA, our routine safety checks might have caught this electrical fire. I turned to face her, astonished by her nerve. In the vicinity, Tyler stood back, observing the firefighters with a look that was a mix of contentment and feigned distress. "An electrical fire?" I echoed. "That's peculiar, considering the fire chief has not yet identified the cause." Barbara's smile remained fixed. "It's merely a guess. These older houses frequently have electrical problems." She patted my arm in a patronizing manner. "Your insurance will likely cover the costs, but if you are considering selling instead of rebuilding, Tyler's company would be pleased to extend an offer. Something straightforward and quick, all things considered." The local police conducted brief interviews but displayed minimal enthusiasm for a thorough investigation. The officer in command, whom I later discovered was a weekly golf partner of the police chief and Barbara's husband, appeared ready to classify it as an accidental fire. "No sign of foul play," he stated after a cursory 10-minute inspection of the scene. "Likely an electrical fault or perhaps something left plugged in." I nodded meekly, embodying the role of a grief-stricken homeowner too stunned to contest. Let them believe they had succeeded. Over the subsequent days, I kept up the appearance of a man defeated. I remained at the hotel with Laura and Sophia, making sporadic visits to the damaged house to retrieve possessions, all the while maintaining a slumped posture and avoiding eye contact with the neighbors. Barbara moved through the neighborhood with a triumphant air, her victory tour thinly veiled as a check-in on community well-being. Jessica called me one evening, her voice choked with tears. "Tyler and his associates came to my house today," she whispered. "They told me that with your house destroyed, mine would be the next unless I sold to them. They are aware of the exact amount I owe on my mortgage, Michael. They proposed a price $40,000 below its market value and said I should think myself fortunate." Her voice wavered. "They mentioned that no one would be interested in buying in a neighborhood prone to random house fires." The various elements were beginning to align. While I was publicly playing the part of a broken man, I was covertly meeting with federal law enforcement officials, supplying them with a wealth of evidence. Financial records that demonstrated fraud, statements from victimized residents, and, most damningly, unambiguous video evidence of the arson attempt. I discreetly shared details of my professional history that I had previously kept confidential. My deep familiarity with the justice system, my expertise in constructing intricate legal cases, and my contacts within federal bodies. The agents were especially intrigued by the real estate aspect of the case. This has crossed state lines, one of them remarked while examining the documents. The development firm is incorporated in Delaware. The properties are located in Massachusetts, and the money seems to be channeled through accounts in New York and Connecticut. That provides us with the necessary jurisdiction. The FBI launched a formal inquiry but advised me to be patient. To build a case of this magnitude requires time, the lead agent clarified. We must link all the elements, the HOA fraud, the real estate racket, and the consistent pattern of intimidation. We are not just targeting Barbara and Tyler. We want every person involved, including the executives of the development company. I consented to keep up my facade of defeat while they conducted their work in the background. Meanwhile, Barbara organized an emergency HOA meeting to discuss the tragic fire and ongoing community safety issues. Standing at the lectern, she declared with ill-disguised glee that I was thinking of selling my damaged house and leaving the area. Sometimes, it requires a significant event for individuals to understand they are not suited for a community that upholds our standards, she wrapped up, to assenting murmurs from her staunch followers. Are you certain you wish to proceed? The agent inquired of me. They could become more aggressive. I glanced at the family photograph on my desk. Laura in the hospital following her panic attack. Sophia still affected by the poisoning. I have dedicated my entire life to upholding justice, I stated, selecting my words with care. And this is not the moment to waver. I opened my laptop and logged into a system that was not accessible to everyone. The time had come to employ tools I had so far refrained from using. With the investigation moving forward discreetly, I needed to reinforce my support within the neighborhood. I selectively shared a part of my professional legal history with Tom and Jessica, clarifying why I possessed the expertise and means to effectively counter the HOA. I have been part of the justice system for the majority of my career, I informed them during a private conversation at a diner situated 20 miles from Oakage. My background provides me with certain benefits in collecting evidence and constructing a legal case. Tom nodded in agreement. I had a feeling you were more than just a software professional. The way you've recorded everything from the outset is not typical for an average homeowner. Jessica appeared visibly relieved. So, there's a real possibility we can actually defeat them. I detailed how they could contribute without exposing themselves to danger, stressing that the authorities were now engaged, although the investigation had to stay under wraps. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies broadened their inquiry, finding that Barbara and Tyler had links to comparable real estate fraud operations in 3 additional states. Their method was uniform: gain control of a neighborhood via the HOA, harass homeowners who resisted selling, devalue properties through biased enforcement, and then acquire these properties at reduced prices for a development firm. What made this particular case so shocking was its progression to arson and the drugging of a minor. I used pressing work commitments as the reason for my absence from the neighborhood for several days, allowing Barbara to think I had abandoned the struggle and was now concentrating on my career while deciding the fate of the house. Her self-satisfied emails about community cleanup efforts aimed at my damaged property kept coming. Barbara heard media reports about a significant corruption investigation, but failed to see any connection to her own circumstances. Tyler, on the other hand, became progressively more on edge as whispers of federal agents making inquiries circulated within the real estate world. He started to try and destroy evidence, deleting emails and pressuring Douglas to keep quiet about the financial discrepancies. He showed up at my house at 11 p.m., Douglas informed me during a clandestine meeting at a highway service area. He said if I disclosed anything about the HOA finances, he would ensure I had an accident. Just like that software engineer. He was intoxicated and terrified. Michael, these individuals are coming apart. I assured Douglas that his statement was secure and provided him with a contact number for the federal agent in charge of the case. The conclusive stage of my strategy was set in motion with a seemingly capitulatory phone call to Barbara. "I'm thinking over your proposal," I said to her, my voice deliberately weary and defeated. After all that has transpired, the thought of rebuilding is just too much. Laura's health cannot endure the additional stress. Barbara's triumphant tone did little to hide her glee. "I believe that is a prudent choice, Michael. Tyler's company is prepared to give you a reasonable price, even with the fire damage. Why don't we convene at the Greenwood legal offices tomorrow to go over the details?" They are an impartial third party who can handle the legal arrangements. Of course, Greenwood Legal was far from impartial. They managed all of Meridian Real Estate's dealings. What Barbara was unaware of was that I had already conferred with federal agents about using this meeting as a chance to secure final, decisive evidence. The following morning, I walked into the unassuming office building, looking suitably downcast. Barbara met me with a predatory grin, with Tyler standing arrogantly by her side. Attorney James Greenwood, whom I knew from my inquiries was also employed by Meridian, presented documents that offered approximately 60% of my home's value before the fire. Considering the significant damage and the issues you've faced in the neighborhood, this is a very generous offer, Barbara clarified, her tone patronizing. We are even prepared to manage the insurance matters. Emboldened by what she took for my capitulation, Barbara's confidence grew as our discussion went on. The HOA upholds certain standards, Michael. Some individuals are simply not community-oriented enough to grasp our vision for Oakage. Tyler chimed in with a nod. At times, people require a gentle nudge to make the appropriate choice for the collective good. I glanced at the demeaning offer on the table, then back at Barbara's victorious look. Just to be certain, I stated deliberately, this offer is conditional on my foregoing any claims related to harassment or property damage. Barbara waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. That's all in the past. Accidents are a part of life in any neighborhood. Her stress on the word accidents lingered in the room. Like the fire? I queried with an air of innocence. Barbara's smile became rigid. Electrical faults are quite frequent in older properties. I nodded as if in deep thought. And my daughter's unexpected sickness? Tyler fidgeted, but Barbara's self-assurance remained unshaken. Children fall ill. You can't possibly be implying that someone in our community would inflict harm on a child. The recording device concealed in my briefcase and a button on my jacket captured every single word. Actually, I stated, sitting up straighter in my chair, that is precisely what I am implying. I pushed a button on my phone, and the office door swung open. 3 federal agents walked in, their badges clearly visible. Barbara Whitfield and Tyler Whitfield. We are here to talk about the current federal inquiry into fraud, extortion, and attempted arson. Barbara's face went white. This is preposterous. We are in the middle of a confidential real estate negotiation. The lead agent set a file on the table. We possess substantial evidence of a widespread racketeering operation spanning several states, Mrs. Whitfield. This includes video evidence of your son setting fire to Mr. Harrington's house. Tyler shot to his feet. Mom, don't say another word. We need legal counsel. Barbara's surprise gave way to rage as she glared at me. Who in the world are you really? The agent next to me provided the answer. Mrs. Whitfield, you have been trying to extort and threaten federal judge Michael Harrington. The room became utterly still as Barbara's jaw literally fell open. Judge Harrington has been assisting our investigation while collecting evidence of your criminal activities. The color vanished from Tyler's face as he sank back into his chair. The lawyer started to mumble about misunderstandings and a lack of personal knowledge. Barbara immediately changed her approach, asserting she was unaware of Tyler's independent activities and was shocked and horrified by any unlawful conduct. Their frantic efforts at denial were perfectly recorded for the official proceedings. Within a few hours, Barbara, Tyler, and 6 other accomplices, including the corrupt police chief and 2 other members of the HOA board, were in federal detention, confronting charges that spanned from mail fraud and extortion to attempted murder. I organized a community gathering at the local school auditorium, finally disclosing my true identity to the entire neighborhood. For those of you who are not yet acquainted with me, my name is Michael Harrington, I started, speaking to the crowded room of bewildered and intrigued neighbors. Although I have been working from home as a software consultant since our move here, my main profession for the last 15 years has been as a federal judge, focusing on cases of corruption and organized crime. A wave of amazement went through the audience. When my family had to move to be nearer to my wife's cancer treatment center, I chose to keep my profession confidential for our security and privacy. I had no inkling that this choice would result in the exposure of one of the most sophisticated real estate fraud operations I have ever come across in my time on the bench. Judge Harrington, are you worried about similar situations occurring elsewhere in the country? A journalist questioned as I departed the courthouse. I stopped and looked straight at the camera. This is no longer about me or my family. It's about the thousands of families who are being intimidated and cheated by corrupt HOAs. I was unaware that this remark would cause my phone to ring incessantly through the night with calls from all over the country, including a particularly notable one from the White House. The trial of Barbara Whitfield, Tyler Whitfield, and their accomplices turned into a media spectacle. Acting as the victim and key witness instead of the presiding judge, I took the stand to recount the months of harassment, intimidation, and escalating violence that my family had faced. The prosecution laid out a compelling case with a mountain of evidence: financial documents revealing millions in stolen HOA funds, video recordings of the arson, statements from numerous victimized homeowners, and audio recordings of Barbara and Tyler's own damning confessions. National news teams set up camp outside the courthouse every day, elevating what could have been a local corruption case into a national symbol of HOA misconduct. "This is not just about a single neighborhood in Massachusetts," the lead prosecutor stated to the press. "This case has brought to light a recurring problem in suburban areas across the country, HOAs being used as tools for profit at the expense of homeowners." Barbara's defense in court was foreseeable but futile. She depicted herself as an unknowing pawn, asserting that Tyler and the development company had taken advantage of her. "I was merely trying to uphold the standards of the community," she tearfully declared on the stand. "I was completely unaware of their true intentions." Her act might have been persuasive if not for the vast amount of evidence that painted her as the orchestrator, including emails where she explicitly detailed their methods of intimidation. Tyler, who was facing a potentially longer prison term, quickly betrayed his mother. It was her concept from the very start, he stated as part of his plea deal. She was the one who contacted Meridian Development about acquiring the neighborhood 3 years ago. She claimed she knew how to persuade unwilling homeowners to sell. His testimony brought to light similar rackets they had run in Connecticut and New Hampshire, which had resulted in the displacement of dozens of families through methodical harassment. Douglas, despite his clear anxiety, took the stand to detail the years of financial deceit. "Mrs. Whitfield operated 2 distinct sets of financial records," he clarified, his voice shaky. "The public records indicated normal HOA activities, while the actual money was funneled into personal accounts and front companies." When questioned about why he had not come forward earlier, his response struck a chord with many in the courtroom. "She was aware of where my grandchildren attended school. She possessed photographs of my daughter on her way from work." When an individual has that level of authority over your community, you persuade yourself that it is simpler to ignore it. Other residents recounted comparable experiences: how Barbara had exploited personal details against them, how minor forms of opposition were met with increasingly severe repercussions, and how they had endured years of constant apprehension. The jury deliberated for under 5 hours before delivering guilty verdicts on every charge. Barbara was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Tyler, benefiting from his cooperation, still received a 12-year sentence. Their associates in real estate and other accomplices were given sentences that varied from 5 to 15 years. As Barbara was escorted away in handcuffs, she glared back at me with unadulterated animosity. At that moment, I felt no sense of victory, only a profound sense of relief that she was no longer in a position to cause harm to my family or anyone else. The judge mandated significant financial restitution for all the affected homeowners, to be sourced from the confiscated assets of the development company and Barbara's concealed funds. More significantly, the case led to the formation of a Senate Special Committee on HOA reform, and I was invited to participate in the drafting of new laws aimed at preventing such abuses in the future. Laura finished her last course of treatment 2 months after the trial ended. Her oncologist expressed cautious optimism regarding her prognosis. "The stress certainly did not aid her recovery," he confided in me. "But she possesses remarkable strength." Sophia made a gradual recovery from her harrowing ordeal, although she kept up her sessions with a therapist to come to terms with the trauma of being drugged at her school. Our neighborhood also embarked on a slow path to recovery. With the dissolution of Barbara's corrupt HOA, the residents organized elections for a new, transparent homeowners association. Tom was elected president by a unanimous vote, with Jessica as treasurer. Their initial action was to slash the monthly fees by 70% and create clear, written rules that necessitated resident consensus for any modifications. 6 months following the trial, I was surprised by a phone call from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. "We have been observing you for a while, Michael," he remarked. "Your management of the Harrison corruption case last year was outstanding, and now this. Your distinct insight into how corruption impacts everyday people would be of immense value at a more senior level." The prospect of a Supreme Court nomination was appealing. But after talking it over with Laura and Sophia, I turned it down. My family has endured enough, I clarified. At this moment, they require constancy more than they do the prestige of my career progression. Instead, I took on a role as the head of the newly established Judicial Committee on Community Governance, which would enable me to tackle HOA misconduct on a national scale while still living at home. A year after the fire, with our house fully renovated and enhanced, we threw a large barbecue for the entire neighborhood. Children were playing on the very lawn where threatening notes had once been placed. Neighbors who had previously averted their gaze now engaged in relaxed conversation on our porch. Tom lifted his glass to make a toast to Judge Harrington, who demonstrated that confronting bullies is not limited to school grounds. The crowd chuckled, but Laura gave my hand a squeeze, aware of how narrowly we had escaped losing everything. Later that evening, as the final visitors were leaving and we were tidying up the backyard, a young couple came up to me with some hesitation. "We're moving into the Henderson property next week," the woman said. "Everyone keeps saying how fortunate we are to be joining this community now, but no one is willing to explain precisely why. What took place here? Sometimes, justice is not found in courtrooms or through the actions of law enforcement. Sometimes, it starts with a single ordinary individual who is courageous enough to refuse to accept injustice." Barbara believed she could bully a meek software engineer, but she ended up facing a federal judge. However, the most crucial lesson I took away was this: one does not need to be a judge to stand up for what is right. My house is still standing, and whenever I see new neighbors arriving, I simply smile and say, "Welcome to the neighborhood where no one will set your house on fire just because you declined to join the HOA."